All right, Ike. So, in the news this week, I know you're such a fan of Land Rovers with hemp ropes wrapped around various parts of the bodywork and roof. One of the most famous ropied up Land Rovers, the Specter Defender, which did the Specter Defender really popularize that, like, connect a rope to the roof rack and then down to the bumper and then back up to the roof rack in a way that you would never do with a real rope, because that would be such a bitch to connect and disconnect. And
I'm not sure where that started, but I picture that trend continuing to the point where people are just weaving dream catchers between the bull bar and roof rack. With hemp
ropes, yeah. At some point, there will be a Land Rover made completely out of hemp rope. There won't be any aluminum left; simply a hemp rope version of the car. Or I guess you could just cover it with like a spray glue and just sort of dust hemp rope bits all over it, and it sort of look like a rattan chair.
Maybe they can add it to that line of like rusted effects that one company sells for Land Rovers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love the rust effect. Anyways, that aside, the Specter Defender, the most ropiest of all Defenders, there is one of the actual movie cars, actually one of the cars from the film Specter, in celebration of now another Bond movie coming out. That Specter movie was, how long ago was it? 5 or 6 years ago, wasn't it?
It's been a minute.
Seems like a long time. Anyway, so this car is for sale. Originally, the car was about $60,000, give or take, 60 pounds, 60,000 pounds, give or take. Now on sale for the low price of 250,000 pounds.
It seems reasonable,
right? It isn't the one. It isn't the one where the guy sits on top of the roof.
Give me two.
Drive it. You want
give me
two?
two.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, give me two.
I'll sign you up.
So is this a car that was like wrecked in the film? And then because I remember not that awfully long ago that one of the Spectre Defenders that was like mangled, like every panel was smashed, came up for sale. And I think they were also asking a crazy amount of money for that car. It was like a Crew Cab 110, I believe.
Yeah, this is also a Crew Cab 110 and roped up. It does not look any more smashed up than a normal factory fresh Defender does. The same sort of rippled dents in the panels that come from the factory.
Wondered if they repaired it.
Ooh, I don't know. Maybe.
This could be your chance to get a genuinely wrecked and rebuilt Spectre
Defender, yeah.
Not that I'm saying that car is that way, because I don't know for sure, but they use several cars in the movie.
Yeah, I want to say there was like as many as 15 cars built for the film. And the one that came before Spectre, they had that silver Defender that Moneypenny drove, and there was actually like a dude on the roof, right, with like a dune buggy seat up there that was actually driving, so they could get through the windshield shots or something, or I don't know, some crazy Bond Defenders. It's pretty cool. Anyways, I don't know.
If you have 15 Defenders and you're selling them for $250,000 a piece, goes a long way towards defraying the cost of.
That's how they'll realize profit on the Spectre film. They're still trying to recoup the cost of that film. Well, you know, what a perfect way to celebrate the new Bond film, but to purchase an extraordinarily expensive Defender from one of the previous Bond films. And I believe that I read somewhere as well that some of the new, the No Time to Die Defenders will eventually be sold as well. They have mud painted onto them, which is kind of interesting. They're the mud is like, it's paint, and it's painted right onto the cars. And there are some super wrecked ones of those as well. So maybe you could pick up one of those.
I can't wait.
Yeah. Anyways, so this afternoon, this evening, this morning, whatever time it is for you, imagine we're doing this in whatever time zone you're in. We're gonna have our good friend Will Hedrick on the show. To talk about importing, exporting, and more importantly, defending Defenders, as Will is probably most famous for his big case where the government tried to seize a bunch of Defenders, or did in fact seize them, and Will, got together the legal case to help those owners get those back, and now he runs in a sort of import business, and I've got lots of great questions for him about sort of how to bring those cars in and stuff in a reasonable way.
Yeah. Importation can be super tricky, and Will has certainly been there and done that with respect to bringing in cars legally.
Yeah,
and avoiding some pretty serious pitfalls, which could involve the seizure of your vehicle,
and
the crushing of your vehicle, the fines associated with that. You could watch it get crushed on YouTube by an excavator.
It's really not. Yeah, they really take the government takes a lot of joy in crushing your Defender. It's sort of.
I'd say it's glee.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed, but other countries around the world have kind of followed suit.
Yeah.
So the Philippines has been promoting videos of them smashing and crushing illegally imported cars and motorcycles. They have like a bulldozer driving over a whole line of illegally imported motorcycles. And, I, for one, am so glad that someone is protecting us from these foreign vehicles that are invading our shores.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
What would we do? What would we do with these wonderfully efficient and modern vehicles that people are trying to import? It's a little silly.
Yeah, it is a little silly. All right, well, let's start up the podcast guest machine. I think we're running it today on a combination of high fructose corn syrup.
Stephen, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I actually have just gotten a call. I've got a customer that I've got to leave and help. He's got a family of possums in his doormobile.
Oh, Jesus.
I've got to take care of this. It's really important. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to let you do the interview by yourself, but I'll be back.
Okay.
I'll be back.
All right. Okay. I'm going to jump into the interview then. Good luck with that. Make sure to bring your possum gloves, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Never without them.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast. It has been hotly anticipated, I think, in the community, if you will, to have you on the show. So thanks for taking the time to sit down and chat this afternoon.
No, it's great. Thanks for having me, Stephen. I've been looking forward to it for a little while now.
Yeah, excellent. So, a question we always start off with, because I think we're trying to develop a theory on why this is, but why Land Rovers of all the brands in all the world, all the cars that you could be fascinated with? Why did you choose the Land Rover?
Wow, that's a great question. And I'm sorry, I'm terrible at short stories, so I'll do my best to keep it brief. But I guess my brother and actually my family and I grew up on a farm here in North Carolina. And so being on a farm, we always had to have four-wheel drive vehicles. Just was kind of a necessity for life for getting things done around horses, cattle, baling hay, et cetera. We did all that during the summertime. And my first vehicle was actually a Chevrolet S10 Blazer. And then after that, I had an 83 Jeep CJ7. But there was a kid I went to high school with. He was a senior when I was a sophomore, I guess. And he came driving by one day in a Alpine White 94 Defender 90 soft top, and I was in love. And stopped to look at it one day, chatted with him about it, and just decided that I was going to have one. And it was in college when I actually bought my first Defender, Portofino Red 94. That I actually found online. This was back in the early days of internet. And I was fortunate enough that the gentleman who made the listing had actually put his telephone number, and I did my super sleuthing, was able to actually find his telephone number and call him before anybody else had a chance to respond to his ad. And I purchased it in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Okay. Flew out, bought it sight unseen, and drove it back to North Carolina. So that was, and then 2 weeks later, after I got it home, the transfer case blew up.
Right.
So,
well, I was going to say, it's surprising you got all the way home without something blowing up. So, well, there you go.
So, but it just been in love with it ever since. I finished university and actually went to work for Land Rover dealer franchise here in North and South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it was Land Rover Carolinas Group. They had 4 stores, and I was with them for about 5 years, and started off in their Greenville store, transferred to the Asheville store. A short period of time thereafter, was there for a couple of years, worked in our Columbia store for a period, and then our Land Rover Hilton Head Savannah store. I was there for the last period that I was with the company. But great experience, great customers. I guess that was the biggest part or the best part of the experience for me, was just the people that I got to interact with. Land Rover people seem to be very like-minded and well-traveled, and just great people to chat with in general.
Yeah.
And so it's the people that's kept me drawn to the community. Even during the periods where I didn't own a Land Rover, I still went to events and I still had plenty to talk about with people who drove Land Rovers. So it's been a great experience thus far, and I'm just continuing on with it.
Well, speaking of periods where you didn't own a Land Rover, this is a period where you do own a Land Rover. So, two-part question: what Land Rovers do you have right now? And then maybe the bigger question, the ultimate question, if you will, is what's your favorite Land Rover if you had to pick one?
Oh wow! So this is not a problem that a lot of people have, but I keep getting given cars, and Land Rovers included. So currently I have let's see, I have 3 Range Rovers in various classic Range Rovers, mind you, in various states of repair around my home. I have 2 Defenders. One my 90, which was my UK runabout, which I've actually only recently imported from the UK. It's actually turned into my regular daily driver now. Just love the truck. I wasn't something that I expected to fall in love with quite as much, but ex British Telecom vehicle, and then the other Land Rover that I have, I guess we'll call it a collection. It's not really. I don't really think of it that way, but it was a gift actually from my clients in my big case back in 2015. It's a kind of a rare bird. It's a Defender that was built by a Land Rover in South Africa during the period which the company was owned by BMW.
Right.
And it's one of about 400 odd Defender 110s that was built with a BMW M52 engine in it from the factory.
Wow.
So that's a 2.8 liter inline 6-cylinder, basically the same engine you would have gotten in a BMW Z3 in the late 90s. So yeah, just a very cool car here underneath a special import permit. It took me a couple of years, a lot of patience to be able to bring it into the U.S., but was able to get granted a special import permit by NHTSA. The only catch to that is that I'm not able to drive on the road.
I see.
So it spends most of the time in my garage. I do have the ability to take it off road. I can't drive it in basically public traffic areas.
Right.
So and then it'll turn 25 years old Halloween of next year, 2022. And then it will actually become U.S. road legal. It basically be grandfathered underneath the current regulatory scheme that exists here in the U.S.
Wow, very cool. So maybe we'll quickly touch on your favorite Land Rover of all time, and then of course we'll circle around to the big case, which of course, if anyone has heard your name, it is very likely that it is in relation to that case. Hopefully, it's that case and not a case of that time you robbed a liquor store or something. But so what is your all-time favorite Land Rover? If you could pick basically any car that Land Rover has ever made, which one, no limits, would be your pick?
Wow, that's actually a really tough question for me, and I'm going to pose to you what actually one of my former managers said when I actually was working for Land Rover. He goes, you fall in love with every Land Rover you see, and it's pretty much true. I can't really explain it, but I'm not trying to claim to save them all, but I do try to save a fair number when I can. I tend to look at Land Rovers a bit like about like dogs, like pets. They're very aptly named in that regard. That they have a lot of the same characteristics, and they require the same type of love and attention that our dog did when we had a dog here in our family. And so, and if you ignore them, they'll be temperamental, just like your dog will, and raise its leg, on your living room furniture, except it'll be in your garage.
That's right.
But it's a very much a symbiotic relationship is the way I view it, and I'm quite happy with all the Land Rovers I had. There are those ones that got away. I still miss my original 94 NAS Defender. I'm not going to say that I don't stalk it occasionally. I know where it is. I haven't seen it in years, but I'm not going to tell you that I don't look at it. But some of my other Defenders have gone on to live with friends. I've got one that's actually living in Las Vegas now. It's 97 that a NAS 90 that I had, and yeah, no, actually, it's hard to differentiate between them all. There's just so many, and I've got ones that I'm chasing now, and ones that I've owned before, and ones that I would like to own. So, I fell as far down the rabbit hole as I think one could actually fall. Well, and I'm still falling.
That's great. No, I think that's a great answer, because you can't, if you can't be with the one you want, then love the one you're with, if you will. So around to the big case. So, Will, of course, you're known, sort of more publicly as the Defender of Defenders, which is, I think, a great title. And for the one person listening to this show that may not know about the great defending of Defenders, what is that about? And can you talk a little bit about that case? I realize, like we said before we started recording, we could probably talk about this for 3 or 4 hours, and certainly have talked about it a lot in the past. But if you could summarize in a short sort of explanation, where did that title come from, and what was that case about?
Wow. So back in 2014, there was actually it was July of that year, and I was actually working for the state of North Carolina at the time. There was online just one day popped up where everybody was like, Department of Homeland Security just showed up at my house and took my truck. And the main website that was involved that kind of facilitated all the communication was defendersource.com. And I had been a member of the site for years, and I was fairly newly minted attorney. I'd only been in practice for a couple of years. Again, at the time I was working for the state of North Carolina. And I was just watching this blow up online and in the evenings. And then, it was a coordinated raid across the entire U.S. from Maine to California and Washington State to Florida and all parts in between. And, all these vehicles have been taken. And it just so happened that one of the owners lived 5 minutes down the road from me here in town. And he ran into my brother. I'd never met him before. And my brother said, well, my brother Will is an attorney, and he used to work for Land Rovers, so he knows these vehicles really well. So you should talk with him. And I get a text message from him, and I'm like, oh, great. So I went and said, well, hey, I'll meet with you after work in the evening. And I met with the gentleman, and heard about his case, and I reviewed the information about his vehicle. I said, somebody's got this wrong. His vehicle in particular had been claimed by the government to be a 2000 model year truck. And in fact, it was a much older vehicle, a 1983 vehicle, which I was able to determine based off the pictures, but proved having inspected it in person. And I told him that I would help him. I told him that I wasn't going to charge him anything. One, because I didn't want to. I mean, if I'd passed any other Land Rover owner broken down on the side of the road, I would have stopped to help. It's just it's kind of what we do in the community. And I didn't feel it's any different. In addition to that, I mean, because I was working for the state, there were all types of regulatory requirements, because if I was getting paid to do it, then I would have to report to the state. And I just didn't want to mess with it. It was just easier to just say, hey, I'll help you out. And so I came home that night and was talking to my wife about it, and slept on it that night. And then I woke up the next morning. And I was like, if I'm going to help this gentleman, I feel like maybe I should offer to help some of the other folks, because this is not right. Yeah. And my naive thinking at the time was maybe like 4 or 5 of the people would reach out to me, and I posted it in one place online, and it never occurred to me that they all would. And so, which is what ended up happening. Yeah. So, that was a couple months in, 6 months into the case. I actually left my job with the state of North Carolina to work on it full time, pro bono, for all of the owners. And 6 months after that, so just shy of a year into the case, the government came to the table, and we had actually ended up settling the case with all the vehicles being returned to the owners at no cost to them. And then the government actually paying damages in certain case where certain of the vehicles had been been damaged, significantly. So yeah. And then after that, my phone just started ringing and hasn't stopped ringing since. But the basic idea in that case was that the vehicles were claimed to be much newer than they they were,
Yeah.
and that because they were claimed to be newer vehicles, they didn't meet US DOT and US EPA regulatory standards for the import of the vehicle, and therefore they were, claimed to be illegal on that basis. And so that's how that all came about.
Wow.
And it's still a lot of what I deal with today, in terms of clients. And I have some varying matters and I work on a couple, even actually more than a couple right now that I've got. If you could look around me, you'd see I have files stacked everywhere. So it's a bit daunting to manage at times by myself, but it does keep me busy. And imports just or dealing with import compliance is just part of what I do.
Right.
To several other aspects. But anyway, I feel like I've been talking for a while, so I'm going to throw it back to you.
No. I mean, that's great. Well, and I wonder how I mean, that is somewhat unprecedented, right? For an action that large by the government. I mean, how many vehicles did it end up being at the end of the day that they came and got?
So it actually was split into two different cases. All in all, I represented about 50 odd folks.
Wow.
And so there was a civil case which involved civil forfeiture, and then there was also a criminal case for which vehicles were seized as well. And the criminal case, I wasn't able to get that case settled out until after I settled the civil case with the government. So that one, it took, I can't remember the exact amount of time, but it was several more months.
Wow.
Before I was able to get those vehicles released and returned to their owners. Several of those vehicles actually ended up being restored in a compound up in Virginia Beach, and I actually went and met several of the owners so that they could pick up their vehicles and take them home themselves. And then there were some more that actually were stored further down the East Coast. But it's rewarding work.
Yeah.
And getting out of the office is probably my favorite part, is actually getting to meet and shake hands and talk with the owners, because again, a lot of times it's difficult to put a face with a name or a voice on the telephone, but getting to meet people and interact with is really the best part of the job.
So how often is something like this happening where, and obviously I'd imagine 50 cars at a time, that is somewhat rare, but how often is the government or whomever, right, coming after some of these vehicles? And do you feel like, are Land Rovers more targeted? I know we've heard about getting crushed at the port and things like that, but is it really just vehicle importing in general? Do they target Land Rovers, and how often is that happening?
So there's actually a division within U.S. Customs and Border Protection that actually targets certain types of vehicles. And no, it's not just Land Rovers. One of the big things going on right now are Japanese mini trucks.
Okay.
They're also a source that's being targeted. In the past, it concerned, later variations of the R32 and R34 Nissan Skylines. There was a big case that actually took place out in your neck of the woods. It's referred to nowadays as the Kaizo case. That it concerned vehicles that were imported, and the EPA actually ended up taking action against them in conjunction with NHTSA. But no, I have cases still involving Land Rover to this day that I'm dealing with. There are issues with import compliance, issues that have popped up recently with regard to what constitutes a restoration. And NHTSA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, can be particular at times about what they consider to be and what not to be a restoration. And and then if the EPA gets involved, a lot of times with the EPA, it has to do with the replacement of an engine, which I think is a commonly misunderstood issue when people come to look at it and come to to deal with it. But and I think a lot of people overlook it when they're looking at importing their own vehicles. But 95% of what I deal with, especially with clients that I'm able to handle shipping for on the front end, is just making sure that the vehicle is compliant before it ever leaves overseas to come here to the U.S. Because again, there's a cost for that up front, but the cost will pay dividends on the back end. Because for me to do a consultation on the front, just to confirm that your vehicle is conforming before it ships to the U.S., it's a fraction compared to what it costs to retain me
Right.
to represent you in a either a U.S. Customs detention or seizure or forfeiture case.
Yeah.
My base retainer in that is just shy of $5,000.
Right.
And that's it's not inexpensive, and I realize that, but again, there's a considerable amount of time that goes into defending a vehicle in one of those cases.
Sure.
And and again, it's not just Land Rovers, mind you.
Right.
Again, there are other vehicles that are affected as well too. But most commonly, known, for most people who are looking to import these vehicles, this general idea that over 25-year-old vehicles, are eligible. But there are a lot of strings attached to that, and a lot of boxes that need to tick. So you can't just generally say, if it's over 25, it can come
Right.
in. When it comes down to specifics like the engine, if the engine has been replaced or if the engine's not the original engine, or more recently, even if the engine's modified, or to have, say, certain emissions components removed from it, that can present a bar to importation here to the U.S. And this is something that, while it may not have been enforced in the past for some vehicles, and because I get this question quite commonly from people who regularly import, they say, well, the EPA or whoever wasn't enforcing that
Right.
in the past. So I'll say, just because they weren't enforcing it in the past doesn't mean that they're not enforcing it now.
Right.
And I can tell you that the vehicles will get turned around or seized. Or when I say turned around, like, they may require to be exported,
Right.
because of issues like these that are now coming up, and then have to be addressed and or corrected. But it's much easier to do that type of remedial work before the vehicle leaves to come to the U.S. than it is to do it after.
Yeah, sure.
And
is it
sorry, go ahead.
easier to bring a car in from Mexico or Canada? Is there any? I know they sold Defenders in Mexico up until 2016, until the last Defenders. Obviously, Canada got that very skinny number of North American Spec Defenders. That's my Defender, is a Canadian Spec Defender, because I bought it new in Canada, and when I'm from Canada. But is there favorability to bringing cars in? Because obviously Canada has the 15-year rule, not 25 years. So there's all kinds of stuff swimming around up there. Is it better, the same? Are there different things to consider?
I mean, yes and no. So where let's say Canadian imports are concerned, and this is one of the things that I wrote an article for jalopnik.com, or not wrote, I was interviewed and basically was a heavy contributor to it. But, I found that there were a hefty number of vehicles that were being illegally imported into the U.S., not necessarily Land Rovers, but other vehicles, that they were being driven down from Canada on temporary import permits. So, as a non-U.S. resident, and the way I would try to frame this is, think of, your Canadian citizen who has a winter residence in Florida.
Sure.
That they would bring this person would bring a vehicle down, and underneath the temporary import, but then it would never leave.
Right.
And so it's never been officially imported into the U.S., meaning no duties were ever paid, because under a temporary import, there are no duties paid. And so if that vehicle ends up getting found or caught, then that person can be liable for all the duties, from the time that it entered the U.S. up to the time, that it's seized. Right. And also liable for any other penalties that may be applicable in between. Right. So it's there's a lot that goes along with it. So just because it's here, and just because it may have a state issue title, does not mean that it's legal. Right. And there's a number of people who are finding that out the hard way, unfortunately. And I do see vehicles that come across the border illegally. Be it from Mexico or Canada, but it's it's just something that if you do your homework, if it seems like it's too good to be true, then it probably is. And that if you're looking at buying something which you have the suspicion is illegal, then you're doing so at your own risk. Right. Because the chances are that something might happen, and
insurance company, or I mean, they're not going to be responsible for it.
Right.
They're just going to wash their hands of it and walk
Right.
away. So, you know, that's your problem.
Yeah, right. And that's
So,
a huge potential risk that you have this car and something happens. And I think that's funny because we chat with people every once in a while. Oh, I'm, doing this or doing that, and said, well, yeah, I mean, just because you get away with it and, the DHS or someone doesn't come after you doesn't mean that, if you were ever in an accident or if the car got stolen, that would be it, then it's gone, and the insurance is not necessarily going to pay for that if in fact they find out that it's not something you should have had there anyways.
So I've actually been hired as a consultant on more than one case or matter involving vehicles, which were just that they were VIN swapped vehicles, where the owner didn't realize that they were buying a VIN swapped vehicle, and then was faced with a liability issue or potential liability issue that they didn't want to deal with. And, I'm thinking of one case in particular, but I've had several, but where the vehicle actually, the state actually intervened and seized the vehicle in question. So it wasn't even the federal government we're talking about this time. This was a state law matter.
Right.
And I actually ended up working with the state police in that state to identify the vehicle. And, and was actually able to show that it was not the vehicle that it was claimed to be. And the vehicle actually ended up being destroyed. I'm sorry to say it, but yeah, it was a fairly involved matter. And but actually my involvement with the state law enforcement officer in that aspect actually led me to having involvement with a group called the International Association of Auto Theft Investigators, and actually lectured at their conference just a couple of years ago, or their international conference, as it were. But it's interesting because it's a relatively small world, no matter which way you look at it, and it's the communities they overlap with each other, and the just things that you see time after time when you're dealing with these vehicles, and I don't want anybody to think that law enforcement isn't looking for these things, because they are. Right. It's just a matter of how you're going about it, and it's just something that you have to be mindful of. If you don't know, I've a heartbreaking story involving a client of mine. I do a lot of work with U.S. military service members, and I have a relationship with the government contractor who are responsible for shipping back what they refer to as POVs, or privately owned vehicles, from overseas. And it's a long story, and I won't go through all of that background, but I developed a relationship with this company over the last several years. And, I created and put in the basically the protocol they use for vetting vehicles before they ship back to the U.S. And so, at any rate, and the vehicles that don't qualify or end up having issues end up getting referred to me. Well, a gentleman got referred to me who had a Land Rover that he had owned for, at that point, a couple of years while stationed overseas. And unfortunately, when the vehicle got referred to me, I had to break the news to the owner that the vehicle had been previously stolen, and he was not aware. And it just was really unfortunate, because again, for a lot of Land Rover owners, these vehicles do become like members of the family. Yeah. And so I felt like I was, telling him he was going to have to put his dog down, because the vehicle wasn't ever going to be able to come back to the U.S. Right. There was nothing that he could do or change about it. And so it was really unfortunate circumstance for him. I mean, and that happens, unfortunately.
Well, so what can people do then, Will, to, if you are starting down the journey of bringing a Land Rover in from outside of the country, maybe even before, and I always suggest that people do call someone like yourself and get them involved early on, because if you're only ever going to import one car in your life, it really isn't something you want to become an expert in overnight. There's no value to that. As we often say, if you can borrow or rent a tool that you're only going to use once, you're much better off than having spent a bunch of money on something you're only ever going to use once. And so what are some things that people can do, again, even before someone like yourself gets involved, to make sure that they don't find themselves in a situation where they're going to have a problem at the border, they're going to have a problem down the road?
Well, I mean, so yeah, there's a fair amount of homework that just it comes into play up front. And if you're knowledgeable about vehicles, then you have an advantage. If you're not knowledgeable about vehicles, then the best thing you can do is hire somebody who is. But I mean, the first thing that I tell people, and because a lot of times the question that I get very often is, do you help source vehicles, for somebody who's looking for one? And, I have in the past under very limited circumstances, but sourcing vehicles is a very time consuming endeavor. And also, it's hard a lot of times to be able to determine, a vehicle's eligibility, let alone its just overall condition when I'm sat behind a computer screen like this. So it's best off to have somebody who's local who can look at a vehicle, but then that raises a whole other set of questions, because I have also had clients who been taken for tens of thousands of dollars by people who represented themselves to be good people, who were aiding people in purchasing vehicles overseas, who upon arrival of their vehicle found that they really was junk. It was nothing that was good. And so there is no substitute for an in-person inspection of a vehicle prior to purchase and or prior to import. And if you're not knowledgeable about what you're looking at, then it's best to get somebody that you know and trust who can do it. And if you don't have somebody you know or trust that can do it, then you need to ask for a referral from somebody that you know and trust who can provide you with a referral. And it's one of the things that we've worked in my office, and I say we, I have a couple of people that help me out, here and there, and they're overseas to work when it comes to inspections like this. And so depending on where they are, but yeah, I mean, crawling around underneath the vehicle, not just to determine whether or not it meets the eligibility requirements, but also just to make sure that you're getting a good vehicle in general. You hear horror stories coming out of certain countries, and I don't mean to lay them on the UK, but where, people, Land Rovers in particular will often have, issues with chassis rot. And I've seen, I've seen cases where, somebody will take newspaper, stuff it into the chassis rail, cover it with filler, paint it black, and represent it as a good vehicle. And unless you go check it, you would have no way of knowing just by visually looking at it. And it's horrifying because the vehicles are rolling death traps. Yeah,
exactly. No, it's a safety thing, and obviously, anytime anyone is misrepresenting, it's tricky, and it's tricky. Not everyone can afford to fly overseas, and certainly now is not exactly the best time to do that, to look at a car. It is always great if you could take that trip and say, I'm going to go to the UK. I've got 5 cars that I'm interested in. I'm going to go look at them, and I'm going to take one, I'm going to start the process on one of them. Not everybody has that. There are lots of great importers here locally too that have inventory sort of. And what are your thoughts on that? Of just, if maybe you're not quite at the point where you can bring something in yourself, about approaching somebody that has inventory here locally.
Yeah, I mean, there are good importers here in the U.S. who buy vehicles, of course, for resale, and again, by doing so, they're taking the risks, as it were. With risks comes reward, and obviously, if you're going to pay somewhat of a premium for a vehicle that's already here in the U.S., there are less costly vehicles that can be had. But again, there's a lot more legwork that goes into that, and there should be cost involved up front. One of the things that I do is, where I'm not being asked to source a vehicle, but I am being asked, whether or not it's possible to inspect it, then I have people that I can refer to that are overseas, who can go perform inspections, for a fee, and be able to report back on, what the vehicle looks like, whether it is not. Another thing that I often times will do in these cases, and again, I don't mean to sound prejudiced in this regard, but it's just a matter of fact that if you're an American, for instance, and you're contacting a seller who's in France, when they see American, they think dollar signs, and multiple dollar signs. So the tendency is, if you're somebody in a foreign country, and you're approached by American, then the price goes up. Whereas if you have somebody that you're dealing with local who can kind of facilitate the transaction, there's less of that involved. You can keep the negotiating within a reasonable range without fear of it, skyrocketing all of a sudden. But yeah, I've seen this happen in more than one case where somebody just and say, "Oh, you're American." Well, then the price.
then here's the price. Yeah, exactly. So, Will, if people are interested in getting a hold of you and either retaining your services, hopefully before there's an issue, or God forbid, if they're in a bit of a troubling spot, what's the easiest way to do that?
So they can go to my website, defenderofdefenders.com. I'd like to add, by the way, that I didn't give myself that name. That was one that was given to me by the community. I liked it, though.
Absolutely.
So I went ahead and embraced
the
it.
best nicknames are ones, sort of a title, if you will, that has been imposed by the community, and I think very rightfully so.
Yeah, I just didn't want to give this idea that I was conceited in any way. I mean, it was actually a friend in the Defender community. His name is Mark. Mm-hmm. And he posted it, and it just stuck, and so I just went with it. I mean, so you contact me that way. I will, in full disclosure, it's just me for the most part here. So there tends to be a backlog of emails, and it takes me a little while. Eventually, one of these days, I think I'm going to have to break down and hire somebody to work with me full time to kind of vet through and keep everybody up to date. But you can send me an email. It's probably the best way. You can call, but these days, because of the number of phone calls I tend to get, I tend to let them go to voicemail and have to sort through them later. It's just not feasible for me to keep up with them all the time. And in addition to like the normal imports, so because we handle vehicle imports through my office, and I have somebody that does assist me with that on a part-time basis, basically handling clients. But I also have like regular full-time clients, one of whom is a new vehicle manufacturer. So, parts, et cetera, final assembly for the vehicles they build are actually, is actually done here in the U.S., but they're, the parts are actually imported from overseas. Excuse me. And so I have them as a full-time client as well too. And, I have, a different array of ongoing cases. I have one case that's pending before the U.S. Court of International Trade right now with regard to a vehicle import issue, actually a classification issue. And actually on that subject, there is something for the Land Rover community I think is fairly pertinent. But U.S. Customs, of its own accord, not really involved with any other government agencies, but they've really clamped down on the vehicle classifications where it comes to Defenders, and by that I mean passenger vehicles versus vehicles, which they term or commercial vehicles for the transport of goods. And there's a significant rate difference in the duty. So for a passenger vehicle, it's 2.5%. Based on the purchase price or the value of the vehicle, versus for a truck or van. That jumps up to 25%. So it's a 1,000% increase over the passenger vehicle duty. But it's, it can, if you're somebody who's looking at buying one of these high dollar Defender restorations, and it's not something that was originally classed as a station wagon, then you're potentially being so if you're looking at buying $100,000 Defender, then you are, like a 130. That's a $25,000 duty price tag that's going to go on top of that. So it's just something that you need to be mindful of when you're looking or purchasing a vehicle like that. And that, again, you can step that back down all the way back to, vehicles that are within a, more normal price range. But I mean, it seems like the prices for these vehicles only seem to be going up.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, I think, with the new Defender now and things like the Ineos Grenadier and things like that, I think it's going to be an interesting few years for vintage Defenders, but it doesn't seem like the desire for them certainly is not waning. If anything, I think it's only building. So before we let you go, Will, there is a sort of tradition amongst guests here, the lightning round, which normally Ike does, but I'm going to have to fill in as best as I can this afternoon. So basically, here's how it works. We've got a series of questions, and pick someone at random, and this will help determine your preference for a Land Rover vehicle. So are you ready for the lightning round, Will?
Yes, so let's do it.
Okay, here we go. Ready? Leaves or coils?
Coils.
Gas or diesel?
Gas.
Hard top or soft top?
Oh man. I'm gonna go with soft top.
All right.
Sure.
Bronze green or Tambora orange?
Bronze green.
Best way to get 90 weight out of your underpants?
Just hanging them outside and let it drip.
Import or export?
Import.
Port of Los Angeles or Port of New Jersey?
I'd rather. I don't know. I ship more vehicles in through New Jersey, but I do like visiting Los Angeles. I'm gonna say Los Angeles. Sure.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Will. We appreciated the time tonight. Fantastic information. We're definitely going to have you on again because I think the topic of importing Land Rovers from overseas is only going to become more as those cars get older and more interesting cars can come in and all that. We didn't even really touch on the 25-year rule, so definitely let's try and get you back in the future for a round two, as it is absolutely fascinating and I'm sure something people love. So thanks again, Will.
Yes, sir. I'd love to, and I look forward. Thanks again for having me.
All right. Cheers for now. All right, and we're back. And Ike, welcome back. How was the possum fight?
Woo! It was touch and go there for a minute, but the entire family was safely relocated from the Dormobile to a more natural habitat. So
a Series 3 lightweight.
Series 3 lightweight. It was actually a P38 Range Rover Vitesse.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, it's good. They're very comfortable, leather interior. They're happy. Yeah,
guaranteed to be stationary too.
Yeah, there's no way that's moving. Yeah,
no way.
That
moving.
thing lost a timing chain in the early 2000s and hasn't moved since.
Yep.
Good times. All right. Well, great conversation with Will. He's as always, a great orator of all things legal and import and, again, just sort of things to do before you, end up with a vehicle you own in Spain and God forbid it gets to the port and then has to go back to Spain or even worse, gets crushed. So Will's a great resource there. Again, can be contacted through his website, defenderofdefenders.com, which
sorry to have missed that.
Yeah, no, it was a good time. He says hello, by the way, and is we'll catch him on the next time. I think we'll have Will on again at some point in the future again to talk a little bit more about the 25-year rule and some of those things that we didn't really have a chance to go deeply in depth in because he's a wealth of knowledge in that front. So, Ike, there is speaking of the 25-year rule, a listener question that has nothing to do with the 25-year rule from our good friend on Patreon, Jeff, last initial E, as we want to maintain everyone's anonymity here. He asks, and this is an interesting question and a little spooky. My left headlight is much dimmer than my right headlight. In high and low beam, I've checked fuses and the bulbs, meaning I think he switched bulbs. What could it be?
Well, this electrical problems in general can be somewhat hard to diagnose, especially at a distance. But I think we can come up with a short list of
we're going to set that up as a contest from across the street. What's wrong with this wiring? Like, have you checked the fuses?
Well, you'd be surprised. I get a lot of questions from customers calling over the phone.
Yeah.
And
what's this sound?
What's
this sound?
Frequently, that does happen. I'm driving along and it's making a sound. What is it? Yeah. Sort of thing.
Do you have them then perform the sound for you?
I do.
I feel like that could be a segment on the show. I mean, we need to do that.
I try to have them do it at least 3 times.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the first one's all you really need. The second 2 are purely for entertainment.
It sounds like you have monkeys in your car. I don't know.
Sounds like you're bad at doing car impressions. I don't know.
That reminds me of the cartoon from the Series 1 owner's manual, that says if the car fails to start, ascertain why, and it has the little cartoon of the guy with the hood open and there's a pig in the engine compartment. I love that.
I do.
I love that.
In the manual for a car that you buy from a company, that is the cartoon. That's fantastic.
Literally the first picture on the first page of that manual is like a guy with the whole rear axle apart sitting on the floor. That's the first picture in the manual.
Yeah, you really they're upfront about what you're in for. It's good.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah. But at any rate, back to the headlight. I think that there's certainly a couple things that can cause a dim headlight, and whether you're working on a Range Rover or a Discovery or a series truck or whatever, headlights all need the same things. They all need power and they all need a ground. And so you're clearly getting power because you've got it's on.
Yeah,
it's on. So we know it's getting power, but you can make sure that the terminals are not corroded. Maybe it's not getting enough power. You could put a multimeter on that, make sure that there's not a voltage drop there. At that headlight, make sure it's getting full voltage. And you can also check the ground, make sure the ground is clean and tight and, well secured against a metal part of the frame or body. I don't know what Jeff drives or what Jeff has, but it's
a great question. Actually, I didn't ask. I don't know.
Yeah,
I assume it's a Land Rover.
I suspect that's true, but there are different types.
I believe it's a Series Land Rover that isn't a Series 1. I'll bet it's a 2, 2A, or 3. I think we can narrow it down to that.
Let's guess what Jeff has.
Let's guess what he has.
But if it's a Series Land Rover, there is a ground on the radiator panel. So both of the headlights ground usually to the same point. Typically, it's a small bolt.
Yeah.
In the just right around the hood latch, and that should have 2 ring terminals that are follow out to the ground wires for the headlights, and that guy should have a star washer on it so that it makes a good
it gives a good cut.
Yeah, and so that's important to check that ground.
I've seen
suspect
sometimes
that might
the bullet terminals, that allow you to disconnect the wings from the car. It'll get shitty in there, or there'll be a little bit of wobbliness. There's a tool I realize that Moss sells. I've never known there was a tool that puts that together better. It's because Jaguar owners, I guess, have very poor hand strength, and so pushing them together with their fingers would be impossible. So there's a special $30 tool that does it. But
I use and sell that tool as well, because after doing an entire harness of those little things, you will also have blisters on your fingertips.
It definitely is rough on your hands. I just didn't realize there was a tool. All these years, I've just been jamming them together manually, and I could have had a tool.
When you do that, you can't. The insulation on the sleeve sticks out past the metal connector inside, and so you cannot physically get the bullets fully seated with your fingers.
I do it with a little flat-headed screwdriver, but this tool seems much more elegant. I had no idea.
It's worth that.
All right, I'm going to get one.
You can make your own. You don't need a.
That's speaking of which, I'm in the midst of making a few steering relay assembly tools. As I got so frustrated trying to do all of the crazy things that people suggest online, I just looked up what the Land Rover tool, the factory tool, is, and it's like the simplest thing in the world. So
it's pretty basic.
Yeah, laser cut some plates and welding some bars on them, and it's great. I use this company. I've just tried them because a friend is using it on his Humvee electric conversion, which is a pretty amazing separate thing. Anyways, Oshcut, which does they're a laser cutting company out in the Midwest, and they did a great job. It was very easy. Just upload an SVG file to them, and a couple days later you get some steel cut parts. So it was great. Really good.
That's cool.
So speaking of,
wait. Let's finish addressing Jeff's headlight issue.
Oh yeah.
The other thing Jeff can check is that he has the same type of bulb in both sides. Yeah. It's frequent for one to burn out and one to be replaced, and then the two don't match, and then you can definitely see a difference in brightness or dimness between the two.
Good point. Maybe try moving, although it's a little bit of work, moving the bulb from the left side to the right side to see if the problem goes with the bulb or if it stays with the socket. At least that allows you to narrow it down to one thing.
You could also have a possum chewing on
It
your
could
wiring.
be a possum. Wiring possums are a big issue, especially this time of year. So speaking of patrons, Patron, which is a transformer, I believe. He transforms into support for your podcast. Anyways, all of our patrons and anyone, in fact, who signs up through the end of this week, and this week is in time. Let me just check because I don't entirely remember. And I will cut this out. And I will forget to cut this out, so this will probably still be in the podcast. This week, so if you become a patron before Friday, the 22nd of Her Majesty's October, then you will receive, along with all of our current patrons, a special edition sticker set. We're talking about every special edition sticker we currently have. The Camel Trophy Glitter sticker, the metallic 80-inch, and a brand new holographic Underpowered Hour logo. We're talking about a holographic, mirror-y, kind of rainbowy holographic logo. You will receive all 3 of those stickers in the mail, mailed to your home or business.
But wait, there's more.
What? In fact, if you are not a patron for whatever reason, you should be, but if you're not, that's fine. You can visit our brand new Underpowered Hour store.
It's true.
It's beautiful.
It's
It's downtown New York in Times Square. $200,000 a month in rent, but worth it. We sell 9 things. So
support your local Land Rover podcast.
Yeah. So if you are interested in visiting the Underpowered Hour shop to pick up all of the latest Underpowered Hour merch, stickers, T-shirt, that's it.
So much swag.
So many stickers. There is more stuff coming. We're in the midst of negotiating some overseas deals, some deals with seals. On any number of things, hats that Ike has worn, old things from around Ike's workshop, steering relay assembly tools that are shoddily welded together, all these things.
I have a good supply of cracked exhaust manifolds that will be laser etched with the Underpowered Hour logo that we will send directly to your door.
Yeah, and you actually have to buy something on the store to prevent that from happening. Otherwise, we will find a way to get it to you. So make sure you buy a sticker so that Ike doesn't send you any garbage. And of course, that store can be accessed through the Underpowered Hour website, which is underpoweredhour.com. It's .net. Underpoweredhour.com, and there you can listen to the show, of course. You can shop. You can become a patron. You can visit Ike's website, the Venerable Pangolin 4x4. You can visit my website, the Bears Collection, and look at, whatever we've got going on over there. You can then probably go to the podcast from each one of our websites and continue an endless circle of linking back and forth and back and forth. So
hours of entertainment for you and your family.
Entertainment. So that's it for this week, Ike. It was a great show. Really good talking to Will. Glad you haven't suffered any long-term possum wounds. And we'll see you next week.
All right, Stephen. I'm looking forward to it.